Welcome to Feel Seen Space. We are a digital platform designed for artists and creatives who yearn for more. At a time of massive change, what does it mean to create? What role does artistic expression serve for the individual and the collective? On this podcast, we try to answer these questions by interviewing artists on their holistic creative processes, their work, and their personal journey. Hello everyone, welcome to Feel Seen Space. Today we're meeting with the amazing creative director Pierre-Yves Morvan. Pierre-Yves just left the creative agency Dazed Studio, where he arrived in 2019 and evolved from art director to creative director to eventually executive creative director. And in those 6 years, he crafted campaigns for the likes of Burberry, Gucci, Nike, and H&M. 3 months ago, he took a leap of faith and decided to leave the studio and start his own thing. Pierre-Yves has such an incredible eye, but he's also the warmest, most caring and funny person. In this conversation, you'll hear him talk about his journey based on hard work, the importance of community and good vibes, but you'll also hear him reference his lifelong quest for beauty and fashion. We're really honored to have him on the podcast today to discuss this exciting new chapter in his life.
Hi, Pierre-Yves. Welcome to the Feel Seen Space podcast. Thanks for your time today.
Hi, guys. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Let's dive right into it. Where are you in the world right now?
Yeah, so I'm actually in the south of France right now, staying at my parents for a couple of days. So yeah, it's lovely, and you may hear the crickets behind me.
So you're taking a well-deserved break, I guess?
Yeah, kind of a break. I'm still working a bit, but I'm in between my laptop and the pool, doing a bit of both.
Nice. So what are you up to these days? Because we know you took the leap of faith. You quit your full-time job to now start your own studio. So congrats on that.
Thank you. Yes, thank you so much. As you said, I left a full-time job last April. I was working there for 6 years, so that was quite a long time. And after having thought about it for a long time, I decided to leave and to start my own thing. And so far, it's been really good and very rewarding, I would say. It's been just super nice to get back in control and get control of my time again and control of my energy and where I wanted to apply it. So it's just been a bit of a time where I could focus on myself really and what I wanted to do and not think about the business and business objectives and a team and all of that. It's been just really nice to kind of just listen to what I want to do. Sounds a bit selfish, but I think I was at a point in my career where it was either that or I was just going to continue to do the same thing over and over again.
It must have been really powerful, as you said, to take control of your own creativity and the creative freedom and go after the project you really, really wanted to do. Because I'm sure after it was like 6 years at Dazed Studio as a creative director. Did you feel like at the end of these 6 years you had a déclic or something that like happened to you that you were just, I'm done, like I need to move forward?
I wouldn't say it was like one thing in particular. It definitely built up. I think I was reaching a point where I felt like I was going in circle a bit in terms of the project that we were doing, the type of brands that we were working for, and just generally like the politics of working for, you know, a proper, I wouldn't say it's like a big company, but it's like, we'll say a middle-sized company. And I think this was more a build-up of, you know, figuring out that I wanted more and I wanted to be challenged more and I wanted to try something else and I wanted to do it on my own, really. You know, I think I got to a point where I was kind of frustrated with, of ways of doing things that were not mine. And I thought that, you know, maybe I could do it better, or maybe I didn't need to do it the way they wanted me to do it. And I took the risk. And, you know, you kind of have to believe in yourself a bit. But I think for now it's paying off. So we'll touch wood, it continues like this.
I think it's also very inspiring to see you grow. And Days, it was the perfect blend of your taste, your aesthetic between culture, art, fashion. And I feel you're also bringing that with you into your next projects. I'm curious also to hear more about like what type of kid were you growing up? Were you super
Yeah.
creative, curious about everything?
Yeah, definitely. I wasn't part of a creative family, I would say, but I think my parents had an appetite for nice things or for culture in general. And my mom specifically was always trying to, take us to the museums and take us up to Paris for a day and go and have a look at the shops and the nice things. So even though they were not necessarily creative themselves, although my mom loves a bit of DIY, but I think she always liked beautiful things, and I think that's where I got my interest in that. And then as a kid, I was definitely creative. I loved to draw. I was always playing with clothes, and I loved to like dress up. I mean, I was a little gay guy who played with dolls. I would, do makeup on my stepsisters and cut their hair and style them and all of that. So there was definitely, it was always there. My gran was a seamstress, not professionally, but she's always, she was always making things. And I think I was always drawn to that as well.
Amazing. And I feel maybe seeing your family doing things that they love and being passionate about clothes and even just like to go out one day to look at beautiful thing that kind of drives you, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I was always very attracted to, shiny things. I grew up an hour away from Paris, but my dad was traveling back and forth every day because he used to work in Paris. So I had the opportunity to go to Paris quite a lot, and it was always the best days. I was always so excited. I would prepare my outfits. I would have a plan in mind. I knew where I wanted to go, and my mom would take me to, the Galerie Lafayette in the Printemps and looking at the windows and all that kind of things. That aspect, this kind of like glamour, that glamorized idea of Paris, that I was really attracted to that. And that really definitely fueled my love for fashion, I think, in general, I would say.
And did you have like a education as a art director or designer? How did it started?
Yeah, so actually, I was very lucky because I think I always kind of knew what I wanted to do in terms of not necessarily, being an art director or creative director, but I knew I wanted to work in fashion or in a creative world. And so when I got to high school, so in France, that's about when you're 15, 16. I took a specialty in high school, which was basically like art and design. At the time, it was called applied art. So it was very much this kind of merging of art and commerce. It wasn't just like pure art, but we had design, we learned graphic design, architecture, fashion. We had a kind of like a general education around all those different domains. We had history of art, history of design. So I was already as a teenager, I was already being brought into that world. And I feel incredibly lucky to have had that at such a young age because I think this is a time of life that can be very challenging in terms of what you want to do and where you want to go. And I always knew what I wanted to do or that I wanted to be part of that world. So it really kind of, for me, a, it was always something that I felt excited about and I never questioned myself. And then from that, I moved to Paris because that was my target. As I said, I was desperate to go. So I went to an art school, like a applied art school in Paris called École du Perret, which was quite a small school in Paris, which had a lot of specialty in fashion and textile design. And I just wanted to go to that school in particular. I didn't care what kind of stuff it was for. So I got accepted into the graphic design course, the BA, and I went in there even though I was not necessarily attracted to graphic design. But I guess this was my entry in this world, and I was close to, to what I was excited about, like the fashion, the making, the textile, all of that. And so I learned graphic design, but very quickly I realized that what I wanted to do was apply that within the sphere of fashion. And so I did a couple of internships at the time. I did one at Jean-Charles de Castelbajac
Mm.
in Paris. And this was, I would say, like, yeah, my first proper experience of working for a fashion house. And it was mesmerizing, had the best time of my life. Um, and then after that, I guess like throughout the years, and I kind of learned, all the different aspects of fashion. Back in the day, I thought that to work in fashion, you had to make clothes. This was it. This was the only job in fashion. And then, yeah, slowly I've realized that, there was so many different things you could do and so many different aspects of it. And then I think I've realized that maybe I was more drawn to the image side of it. So not necessarily making the clothes, but actually telling the stories around it, and telling the stories around the brand and how you wanted to portray the brands and what they wanted to say and how they wanted to appeal. And so slowly I kind of like learned my way around to be an art director, basically. So that's how I came to it.
It's incredible that you said even as a kid you were so set in your path, right? You almost knew before you
Yeah.
went to school for that. So I'm wondering, did you have any mentors, a teacher or someone during your career that really pushed you?
Um, I don't think I would call people mentors. I don't think I've had this relationship. I've definitely met people that have given me a lot of confidence and that have kind of reflected a lot of good things on me. And that definitely gave me the strength and made me believe in what I was doing and in my skills, in my talents. But I guess there were more kind of like, people that you end up working with or people that you meet on sets and you become close to them. And it was never, I had great teachers and I loved school. It was really exciting time in my life. It was very open, very freeing. But I don't think at the time I had someone who truly understood what I wanted to do. I think it was later in life when I was already an art director, that I was already working for a company, an agency. That's when I met people that were maybe further along in their career, whether they were my managers or things like this. And that's when I had the most kind of help or love, I think. Even though it's a creative job, it's still very much like linked to commerce, and there is real boundaries to it. You have a client, there's money involved. It's not like just la di la da, you do what you want, you just make pretty things. So there is a lot to learn on that side as well. And I think having a manager or someone that you can kind of really rely on, who can kind of carry you and bring you the strength and bring you the confidence to take that on, it's very important, I think, in our field.
I mean, you're talking about confidence, and I really feel it's exactly what you need to succeed, especially in an environment like the fashion industry, where
Hmm.
there's politics, there's ego, there's a lot of people involved, hierarchy. I would like to hear more about, of course, you have like all these amazing people around you that gave you love and still give you love, but did you had like challenging times, let's say, or challenging people in your team that you felt you had the need to express yourself, but they kind of like dim your light a little bit?
Yeah. Yeah, this happened. I mean, this happened particularly once, and it was a new, very exciting job for me. It was my kind of like first, I would say, leading role in an agency. I mean, I can probably say the name. It was for Vogue.
Mm.
Not a shocker. Um,
Oh, I know.
oh, you know. Um, and yeah, I think it was a mix of things. I think it was first of all me stepping into a role that was big in terms of where I came from, in terms of the level of seniority and the responsibilities and what was expected of me. It was definitely a step up, and I don't know if I was super ready for it. And then there was also, on their side, I think there was also a misunderstanding of what that role should have been. And therefore, it was very difficult for me to come in and do it because I think everyone had different expectation of it, especially the team that I was going to work with. And that's where friction happened, because I think they were threatened. They didn't really understand what I was doing. On my side, I didn't feel like I was getting the support that I needed to do it. And so, yeah, it became this kind of like very tiring situation, very stressful situation. I'm also not really, I don't like conflict at all, and I don't deal well with it. And it really kind of built up to a point where I just had to leave, and that's what I did. And it was the best decision I've ever done, even though technically it was my dream job, you know. It was like, I made it. It was a big name. It was like fabulous. I was going to work with like the best brands, and actually that was not the case. It was a whole different reality. And yeah, and I just left, and I didn't have any plan. I didn't have a job lined up, but I really truly believe in kind of going with what you feel deep inside. And actually, it worked out really well, because there was one woman that I've met at Vogue that I felt a really strong connection with. She was the woman who hired me. And actually, it turns out that she was not loving it either, and she left before me. And so I was on my own in that new job. It was really difficult. And actually, when I decided to leave, I told her, because we stayed in touch, I called her back and I was like, I'm leaving. I'm like you, like I hate it here. And by that time, she had started a Dazed Studio, and she said, well, come here. And, I feel like it was written, it was the path that I needed to take. I needed to go through those 6 months of hell to then kind of get to work for an amazing company like Dazed, where I flourished and stayed for 6 years. So it was definitely a bad thing for a good thing.
Yeah, I can relate to your experience, absolutely. And sometimes it's like stronger than you, right? Your body is telling you something.
Oh my
And
God, yeah,
it's almost like your body is screaming at you, what are you doing? But then you have
yeah.
all these like social constructs saying like, yeah, it's Vogue, you have this amazing job, you're gonna work with all these brands, and you should basically stay and suffer through it, to have this amazing opportunity. But for me, and I'm sure for you, this pull of leaving was just stronger than
Definitely.
the
Yeah,
opportunity.
it was very much physical, as you said, like it was feeling your stomach in knots every morning. And I'd
Mm.
never experienced that ever before. I think I'm quite an easygoing person, and I just go with the flow. And I really rarely get on the wrong side of people. And I think for some reason I was in this position there, and I couldn't stand it because I hate it, and I didn't understand why I had been put in this situation. It was not my doing. Yeah, I think this was one of the biggest issue there, is that they put people in this position and they're not able to kind of see that and make good.
Yeah. And I feel it made you also realize your self-worth, right? Because leaving a situation that is toxic led you to have this amazing job and opportunity with people you love. So I'm curious to hear a little bit more about the transition of, when you take a risk, when you face uncertainty, and
Hmm.
you need to trust the universe that something better will come. So how did you manage or regulate your nervous system in between?
Yeah, I think for me, I'm quite a practical person. So when I get stressed, I would sit on my desk and email 1,000 different people. I knew I was gonna leave that job with no plans. It was still pretty early in my career. I didn't have a lot of money aside. It was definitely like rock and roll. But yeah, I this is how I deal with it, is like getting in touch with people, and just having a deep sense within me that it was going to be okay, and that
Mm.
there's always options, down to it's fine, I'll work at a cafe. For some reason, my whole life has been like this. It's always been kind of situations where there was a block, and then, manifestation or the universe was sending me a sign and something will show up. And honestly, I've been freelance for 3 months now, and it's literally just been this, like back to back. emails when you don't expect them, when you've been stressing out the day before because you're like, oof, I don't have anything lined up for next month, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, there's something, you've got to believe in it, I think. And obviously with more experience, things are easier in a way because you do have more to offer, or you do have reinsurance to offer to clients. But yeah, for me, that's how it worked. I was just contacting loads of people, and then I think when that opportunity for Dazed showed up, I just remember the first day going in there, talking to people, and instantly being like, oh, those are my people. We understand each other. There was no jealousy, no nothing. They were just like, cool, you're here to do your job. Let's do it the best we can. And I met the best people there, and they became my best friends. It was funny because 6 months before I was, oh my God, I'm going to Vogue. This is it. This is the peak of my career. And actually, not at all. Dazed was a lot more suited to me and to my skill and to what I wanted to do. And instantly, I felt relief. And then because I felt relief, I was feeling more confident in myself, and then my work was better. And then, it just kind of like built on it.
And I mean, you're an amazing leader. You're a facilitator. You work with a big team, with big brands. You worked on amazing projects from Burberry to Gucci to Spotify to Lululemon. I think also there's a versatility in your work, and I feel you can adapt very well to different projects. What are the role of collaboration for you? Because you work with so many different people, from like print to immersive experience to digital. So how do you manage?
I mean, I think it's really is what my job is as a creative director. You come up with an idea, with a vision, with a concept, but then truly what's going to make it happen is the people that you work with to execute it. So a huge part of my job is being able to find the right team, to brief them the right way, to give them the right amount of support and freedom, and to kind of like orchestrate it in a way that feels the most smooth and the most creative as possible. And that's when the magic happened, I guess. So really, for me, the collaboration element is key to my job. Like, it is 70% of what I do is finding the right photographer that I know will be able to execute this concept, but will also add its own flair to it. And then finding the right stylist who's going to be able to, understand the brands and the vision, but also be able to work really well with that photographer specifically. So it's kind of like a bit of a mind game, and understanding, I would say, subtleties and also sensitivities. I need to know that when I put a mood board in front of someone, they're going to understand it and not just look at the image and be like, okay, cool, that's great. They're going to understand the light and the kind of world that we want to build, and the kind of, the kind of direction we want to take them in. And that comes with experience as well, understanding people and understanding what they can bring to a project.
Work ethic is very important for you, and I'm sure you surround yourself with friends and people that you can really trust, because your vision is going through other people's mind, and also you need to manage clients' expectation as well. What would you say will be the most important values for you when you bring a team on or when you work on a project?
I value curiosity a lot. I value kindness. I'm someone that's quite down to earth. I've been lucky enough to, work for more than 10 years in the industry. And apart this quick episode at Vogue, I've never encountered any kind of, drama and all that kind of thing. I think I've managed pretty well to work around big egos, and I've very rarely had bad experiences on set or with clients or with team members. So I very much value this kind of no drama vibe. I love my job, but it's a job. No one needs to go through pain. No one needs to go through, an insane amount of stress. At the end of the day, we're not saving the world. We are making beautiful images that are meant to, make people feel good. So I really try hard to work with that in mind, and everyone that I bring in with me, for me, that's very important that they feel the same way. And that's why working with friends is like the best in a way, because you already know that you share those values. outside of work as well. So that's really key for me. That doesn't mean that, I will expect a certain amount of work, and I will expect respect, and I will expect not respect towards me necessarily, but just like in general, respecting your team members and the client's decision and the client's feedbacks and everyone else around you, from the junior producer on set to the CMO of the brands. I expect that everyone gets the same amount of respect. I do want someone that works hard, because I worked hard and I still do, and I think that's important. But generally it's more like being a normal person at work. I think it's just that: be normal, be human, be authentic.
No more drama needed.
No, absolutely not.
Do you ever lose track on your creative projects? Maybe you're a professional artist or creative, but what used to be your passion now feels uninspiring. Or maybe you decided to pursue a safer career path, but you just know you have that artistic side of you that's dying to come out. At Feel Seen Space, our mission is to get you back in touch with your creativity, your flow, and your purpose. If you're ready to feel seen, we offer one-on-one holistic mentoring sessions designed to reconnect you to your inner artist. You'll find all the information at the link in the show notes. We hope to see you soon.
So Pierre-Yves, I wanted to dive a little deeper into your daily routine and how do you get inspired on the daily, especially now that you've left the office with the team and all of that going on. How has that transition been like for you in terms of creativity?
So I have to say, I think I'm pretty bad at that. I think it's funny, right? Because I am a creative person, it's my job, but I'm also very happy to like not do any of it. And I've never experienced the need to necessarily have a creative output outside of work, which is funny because there is a lot of conversation around it. And also, I think as a creative director, there is this kind of weird expectation of you having so many personal projects and making a magazine on the side and, doing this and that. And actually, not that I don't want to do it, but I just never felt the need to do it. And also, I don't think I've ever had a good enough idea that made me want to do it. Not that it won't happen. Maybe, with my new setup in life and having more time for myself and for my practice, maybe this will flourish. But so far in the last 10 years of working, I never felt the need to do that. And work has always been challenging me enough and making me learn enough that I felt fulfilled by it, which is very lucky as well. Now, obviously, yes, I go to the museum and I buy books and all of that. I do also spend way too long on social media, but it does inspire me, like, I'm sorry to say, but I do find really amazing people. Like most of the people that I want to work with, I find them through Instagram, photographer, stylist, set designer, artist. To me, it still is an incredible place where you can find those people.
You must have a good algorithm.
Yeah, I think it's that as well. The more you do it, the more you find, the more you look, the more you have suggestions. But also, my job is to work for brands and kind of create content that will live on those platforms. So I do need to keep up with what's happening and what are the trends and what are people looking at, what do people consume as content. It is part of my job. Sometimes it's a bit soul destroying, I won't lie, but I also think it really transcended creativity, I think, and it continues to do so. I love TikTok. I think it's an amazing platform. I love all the content that people started creating on their own and that they've taken their own kind of like, they've created their own style, they've created their own ways of doing things. And I think it's actually quite inspiring to see. Obviously, it comes with its bad sides as well. But to me, at least, it's never been a black hole for my creativity. And I continuously find things entertaining and inspiring on this. Yeah, I think honestly, it's my like main source of inspiration nowadays. And then, my friends inspire me, what they do inspire me. And also, I think as I'm growing older and my priorities are changing a bit in terms of what I want to do in my life and all of that, I'm finding spaces and like physical things more inspiring now as well. Take me to a beautiful house and I'll feel the most inspired.
I was gonna say you're being very modest because you say you have no outlet other than work, but anyone who enters your space is like, oh my God, like everything beautiful and curated. And I feel like it's effortless for you, but it's incredible. Like everything that you bring into your life is so curated and purposeful. Like it's palpable.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess that is an output. Yeah, I do like to surround myself with nice things. Sometimes not for the best, but yeah, I think it's another way for me to. I do get inspired a lot by objects and by spaces and by making things work together. That's definitely an area that I find more and more inspiring, and I think this is definitely something that I'm thinking about in the future. How can this become something more than what it is? I don't have an answer yet.
But I love what you said before around working in fashion, but not wanting the drama, and then being a creative director, but not necessarily wanting to make a magazine. It seems like you're not afraid to reinvent your job and to step out of that kind of old way to do fashion and to be kind of snobbish and be like, no, social media. I mean, obviously now it has changed, but at first people from high fashion were kind of like, it was frowned upon to look at TikTok. It was for kids. It wasn't as highbrow and elitist. And now I think amazing that we realize that creativity comes in many, many ways and many forms, and it actually gives so many people the tools to create things, people who would have never been on a set.
Yeah, I agree. And actually, I think this also really comes from Dazed and, working for a media company, because that's what Dazed is, and being kind of constantly, surrounded by, well, first of all, Dazed is a youth culture platform. So literally you're surrounded by people that are like 19, 20 years old. And so you kind of, in a way, you kind of have to keep up with things because that's what brand wanted when they came to us. They wanted the kind of, to stay on top of what was happening on those platforms. So it forced me to kind of have an appetite for it. And that really changed, I think, my perceptions of what was my job, because yes, we do campaigns and, you do the occasional big print and billboards, but actually most of everything that we do is just being experienced on those platforms. So if you are not thinking about it this way, then you're losing, because yes, luxury brands, they do want to have a nice image, but they do want to sell bags. And they sell bags through those platforms mainly.
Yeah. And I wanted to dive a little deeper in your relationships with brands, because ever since the beginning of this interview, you've been very specific around doing applied arts, and you have this respect for commerce and for fashion houses. And it's pretty uncommon to hear so much respect for clients. Usually it's like, oh, clients ask me this, it feels like you're really putting yourself in their shoes. And so I wonder how that collaboration happens. How is your energy shared between, say, your creative vision and what the client wants and the team that you build? How do you navigate all these different elements? Because I've met a lot of artistic directors or creative directors who have a lot of ego, and what they value the most is their idea, And it seems that for you it's very different, and you kind of welcome everyone at the table.
Yeah, I think this came from more like my experience in general and how I got to this job. Even though my background and my studies like led me to, wanting to work for the luxury brands and all of that, the reality of it is that when I was 26 or 27, I worked for a big advertising agency in London, and we were making commercials for Sainsbury's, which is, biggest supermarket brand in the UK. And that's quite humbling. And, obviously this was not in the cards. This was not what I had imagined for myself, but it did teach me so much in terms of there were huge budgets. There was so much to do. You really had to put yourself in the position of, the customers. And the customers are literally every single people that live in UK. You know, it's a supermarket brand. So the customers are not the 1% that buy luxury product. So that was a very interesting time of my life, and it really taught me a lot. And I think I always kept that inside of me. And I think I always try to stay humble in terms of those kind of brands that come to you because they need help. Because actually, one of the best challenge as a creative director is to make it better, right? Is to elevate or to change the perception of things. And actually, you've got so much more to play with those kind of brands, especially if they come to you. That means they won't change. Whereas the best fashion brands, the best luxury brands, they're already at the top of the game. So yes, you could do beautiful campaigns, but realistically, is your work going to make that much of an impact for them? Not much, I think. Whereas, you know, Sainsbury's might be a bit extreme, but, you know, at Dazed, we work with a lot of like these kind of like brands that maybe had lost a bit of hype and wanted to gaining back, or, you know, smaller brands that kind of like wanting to literally change it up totally and wanting to like, you know, change their image and attract totally different customers. These are the brands that, you know, you can kind of really push. That's where the conversation become quite interesting because they trust you. They also have loads of constraints. They also have loads of things that, you know, are challenging to your creative vision, but that's where you can do the most out of it, I think. Now it's all a balance, isn't it? Obviously, I do love fashion. I do love make beautiful images, and I do love beautiful products. So obviously, I want to have those brands in my roster as well. But yeah, to me, for my career, it's always been a question of balance and having those brands and having those campaigns that give you this kind of like playground for beauty. And then having the other ones that are giving you more like challenges, but where you can do more interesting things and where you can really challenge the perception of customers towards that brand. And I got so much fun doing that as well, and actually kind of surprising yourself by doing so. And things that are not necessarily a win for the big luxury brands, they're such a big wins for them, for the smaller, maybe less, you know, sleek brand, like being able to work with like a really cool photographer for a brand that's not so cool. You're like, yes, you know, this is instantly, it's going to get so much better and people are going to notice it. And that's a big win. So there's been a lot of that as well in my career. And I kind of like that. Honestly, I like the challenge. And I think it keeps you, you know, keeps your ego down as well.
Absolutely. And do you ever have conversations after your campaigns are live? Do you ever know what goes on after? Like, do they tell you about the sales or potential wins that derive from this?
That's a really good question because that doesn't happen enough, in my opinion. It's difficult, right? Because there's no metrics that are directly linked to the creativity of the campaign.
Well, more so with social media.
Maybe on social media, but also there's so much, you know, there's paid now. So you never really know what is organic and not, blah, blah, blah. The best thing for us would be to have a client returning, you know, coming back and asking us to do more. This is the best win for what we do, at least. Or obviously, yes, there's like press and, you know, maybe there's a bit of like conversation around the campaign or around the piece of content that you did. But that again, is difficult because, you know, now you can pay a magazine to talk about the campaign you just did. So it's tricky. And I don't think I've ever had a brand being like, wow, we've like doubled the sales on this specific bag because you put it in that campaign. Yeah, that's never happened.
Hard to measure. But I guess that's the case for the entirety of your job, choosing a team. How do you choose a creative talent? How much of it would you say is linked to their aesthetic and their sensibility? And how much of it is linked also to kind of their personality and how it will feel on set and fit with the other people?
Yeah, that's a good question too. And again, I think it's really about balance and about understanding dynamics and the client needs and what you need as well. Again, it's kind of like curation, you know, almost. It's knowing their skills, but also knowing the personality and what they can bring to you or to the project. And then it's about building teams that can offer you everything that you need. I've worked with widely different creatives and they all have something to bring. And it's just about me understanding when I need what. And that's how I always build my team, really. But then I also, you know, there's also moments where you want to challenge, maybe like younger members of your team because you know that they can do it, even though they don't really feel comfortable doing it. And so I've had times where, I've kind of pushed them to do something that they were not necessarily feeling super good about, but it's how you learn really. In what we do, we are going to be put in awkward situations all the time. You're on set, they're high pressures environments. There is usually you have a lot to capture. You don't have a lot of time. There is many people to manage. There is clients that are expecting results and they're literally there, like behind you, looking at a monitor. So sets are fun, but they're also very stressful. You are going to have to deal with some uncomfortable situations. You are going to have feedbacks that you don't want to hear. You are going to have some moments where a client is not happy. You have to tell the photographer that, it's not working. You really have to learn the art of diplomacy. And actually, maybe this is, coming back to your point in terms of, I do have respect for brands. And I think you cannot do this job if you don't, honestly. And I think also that comes back to this old age, like we need more respect. We need less drama overall. And I think coming into a set with an understanding of things might happen really smoothly, but also you might end up at the end of the day with something that's quite different from what you had expected. And that's okay, because at the end of the day, it's not for you. It's not a piece of art. You're doing it for a purpose and it's being paid by a brand. So it's all about understanding this balance and this kind of like push and pull situation. And I really often say to my team that, if we can do a job that's slightly better than what they've done before, then we're already winning in a way. And it might be subtle, but it's already a step towards something better. You have to keep that in mind, I think. Otherwise, also personally, and it's really hard, because you can be quite disappointed in the output because it doesn't necessarily feel in line with what you think is good or with your personal aesthetic. But you really have to keep things in mind that, it's not necessarily for you. The amount of brands that I've worked with that, I would never be a customer, and that's okay. I don't need to be.
Yeah, you're able to forget yourself and your aesthetics just to serve them better. I feel like it's kind of like a cocktail, and your sensitivity and your like aesthetics is one of the ingredients, but there's so many others.
Yeah, definitely. I also do think, it might change for me now because now I'm on my own. And what I need to do is also being able to sell a bit of, a vision or an aesthetic or a way of looking at things. So I do think that I'm probably going to have to change a bit and adapt, because I don't want to be the guy that like does it all. I don't think it's really good either. But when you work for bigger agencies, it's a bit different, because at the end of the day, it's not your name on it necessarily. It's, it's the agency, and the agency is bigger than yourself, and, it's a job. So if you're being told you need to do this campaign for this brand, then you do it. Whereas for me now, I'm hopeful that, I'll be in a position where I can kind of start curating a bit more, I guess, the clients that I work for and the projects that I take on.
Amazing. And then what has been your journey like around self-worth? Because I feel like creative jobs are always, not always, but within the magazine industry, there's a lot of like working for free situation. And you've always been in big agencies, but how do you navigate, especially now, I guess, like budgets?
So I have been in agencies, but before that, I've done my time of unpaid work, trust me. And that's how it started really. And I don't regret it, but I don't think it was good either. I think it should have been more fair, but I did it, and it led me to better things. So I'm really grateful for it, but I think this time should be gone now and finished. Yeah, I think again, it's tricky because my first job was for this big agency. We were doing those like big commercial clients. So there was already an aspect of like, I knew they were making money, and I knew that, it was still pretty corporate. And therefore, there was things in place, there was reviews, there was 360, all of that. There was a moment where you knew you could ask for more money and ask for a raise and ask for a bonus or all of that. And that really kind of, I think I learned pretty early those kind of conversations, and that really served me well in the future, or in, since then. Every time I've had to change job, you always feel a bit cringe, but I've always forced myself to like negotiate and try to push for more. And this is something also that I think we always talk about with friends. I think it's really something that like you want to put on the table, and your friends are going to be like, no, more, ask for this, ask for that. And I think that's really good. And I think in our friendship groups, we're quite good at it, and we kind of carry each other and kind of try and get the best out of everyone's jobs. So I think the fact that my background was quite corporate in a way, that really helped me. And I just think also right now in my new situation, I really kind of have to remind myself that, the worst thing that can happen is they say no. That's the worst thing that can happen. They'll say no, it's too much. And then you can have a conversation. Then you can figure out whether it's worth it for you or not. And sometimes you really, really want a job, and it's the kind of things that you kind of depending on it. That's why you're feeling a bit even more anxious about asking for more money. But yeah, at the end of the day, if people want to work with you, they'll work with you, and they'll be honest. They'll say, no, we can't afford this. So can we find another solution? So that's something I'm going through right now. And it's, I still have to learn a lot more, but it's very useful, I think, in life.
Absolutely. And you're honestly a big inspiration for a lot of common friends. I'm thinking of one especially who's like, I learned everything from him. Like, I didn't even know you could ask for a raise. Maybe it's as women also, I don't know, but I know you're a leader in that sense as well.
Yeah, I think I was lucky as well to like evolve it was always corporate, but not corporate enough that like you had to follow like salary grids and stuff like this. So I always kind of like tried my best, tried my luck.
Yeah.
That's what I did.
But so within your field, you don't feel like the budgets are getting lower?
Yes. Yeah, definitely. I think the budgets are getting lower, and I think it's kind of reshaping a bit how people work in general. I don't think it's necessarily I don't think it's the end of it, basically. I think, yes, the budgets are getting lower because brands have so much more to do now. They have to have so much more content. It's literally like, they're machines. You have to create so much more than you used to. Then obviously the budgets are getting divided and split and, given to different part of the business. And on top of that, obviously now, it's not a really good time for luxury brands or for brands in general. So there's even less of that. But I think it's reshaping a bit the way brands work with agencies. From my experience, at least I've seen that. And that also in a way was the reason why I've decided to leave, because I think there is now an appetite from brands to work with smaller entities or studios or go directly to, a creative, as opposed to necessarily fall on the big agency that, cost so much money because they have there's so many people to pay. You have the creative, you have the strategists, you have the project managers, you have the operation people, all of that. It's a lot, and they're asking for a lot of money to be able to sustain. So I think it's reshaping all of that landscape. And I think it might be a good thing in a way, because I think brands are forced to maybe recognize the individuals more and maybe change their way of looking at things and maybe take more risk. And maybe they will go for that young creative director that's not so famous and who hasn't got the most amazing brands in his portfolio, but they'll give them a chance. And I think that's a good thing. I'm hoping that I'm that person.
Yeah, but it feels like an interesting time. It's true, because we talk about it all the time with Rox. We feel like all the intermediaries are kind of dying. We see that with photo agencies. We see that with galleries. I mean, obviously, it's sad. It's so many jobs and a whole culture. But it feels like now people want to go straight to the source and not go through that in between that maybe doesn't have a purpose anymore in the internet and social media era.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it also creates a lot of different ways to work with these brands, as opposed to be either in-house or either the agency that does their external work. I think, nowadays they can tap into one person for one thing that they'll do, and it'll just be a beautiful special project, and that person will do it for them. It's a lot more open in terms of collaboration and partnerships, actually. I think brands are hungry for that type of partnerships and collaboration at a smaller scale. And then, yeah, and then you see it on social media, like, on TikTok, especially, brands have started to, understand how to communicate on that platform. It's very different to everything else that's ever happened. And they're finally understanding that, the best way to do that is to tap into the people that already create their own stuff. Loewe does it really well. They send a bunch of product to the most random, like niche influencer on TikTok, and they just let them do their things. And that's brilliant. So again, you don't need to go to an agency and pay absurd fees so that they can tell you to do that. You can just do it yourself. So yeah, I think it's an interesting time. I don't think it's the end of big agencies. I think they'll always have a purpose for different things. And I think, big brands, they don't necessarily have the time, nor do they have the operations to take on or to create big 360 campaigns, global, blah, blah, blah. And I think that's where the bigger agency come and have a place in that landscape. But everything else and all the smaller campaign and, the social campaign and the holidays campaign and all this kind of stuff that brands now have to do, which they didn't need to before, then all of that can go to other people. And that's great. It's more equal in a way.
Yeah. So how do you see all of that evolving? What do you think, like, in 10 years it's going to be like to create images for fashion? The rise of AI and all these new tools that maybe we don't even know about yet.
Honestly, it's quite a difficult question, and I don't really know, to be honest. I mean, if we want to talk about AI, we can, but I don't think it's going to take away our jobs. I don't believe in that. I think for me personally, it's a tool that we should learn to harness because it's going to unlock so many more opportunities and ways of doing things. I think it's definitely going to reshape again how we do things and who does what. But I think it'll also probably create new kind of jobs and new kind of creations. So I'm hoping that the way it kind of goes in the future is there is more people that do different things, and that brands will have to tap into all those different peoples for all different ways. There'll be people that just do AI maybe, and then maybe brands will have things that can only be created by AI, and that's great, that's cool. But then maybe they'll go to like other people that do like just self-shot content, and then they'll go to people that can do only like, I don't know, collage or whatever. I'm hoping it just gives more different branches of content and execution and style. Maybe that's a bit naive, but I'm hoping this.
I agree with you. And then the other aspect that seemed to have changed from where we started, and we're not that old, but say like 15 years ago, I feel like it's the rise of celebrity culture and influencers. And how has that also shaped the evolution of your career?
Yeah. I mean, I actually think it's changing already. I think it's become such a normality now that there's some subversion happening. And, what is a celebrity actually? I think it's quite hard to define now. In my experience, yes, I've had to work with celebrities and with, you have the kind of like faces of brands that are kind of like key, or they're almost part of the briefing process. They tell you, we're going to shoot this person, you have to create a whole campaign around that person. To me, that's the constraint, like another one.
That's the extent of it. You never have to yourself source up and coming.
Yeah, you do as well sometimes, and that's quite exciting, to be honest. I love trying to think about who would be good for what brands. I think it's quite a funny game in terms of like aesthetic and what they represent and what their value is and how people perceive them. I think it's quite fun to try and pair people with brands. I think it's casting, at the end of the day. It's just casting with bigger money, with, with more money. But I really do think that celebrity means everything and nothing nowadays. I think it's more about values, I think, about pairing the right people for the right brand and what they represent. And I think that can be on huge scales. Yes, you can shoot the Kardashians and the blah, 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 but it can also be on such smaller scales, and that person would be as valuable to a brand than a Kardashian. So yeah, for me, it's more like part of creative process almost. Who would be good for what for who, essentially. It's never been a negative parts in projects. It is in terms of, maybe they're difficult and maybe they will be more difficult than a model, but actually maybe they'll give you a lot more and maybe it'll be more interesting and, maybe they'll have more kind of personality and they'll be quite generous with the way they work. And so it's just another layer of what you have to kind of keep in mind when you work with brands for a campaign that has a celebrity in them. But I don't know, for me, this is all moving and it's all evolving. And I find it quite interesting, to just see what brands are doing in that world, in that sphere, who they work with. I think it's quite telling. I think it's very telling in terms of relevancy.
Yeah, it feels like you're like the conductor of an orchestra, and that orchestra is ever changing, but you're always just like keeping the tempo.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. It's very much, it's very much that. I think that's what my job is a lot, for sure.
So cool. And so outside of your job, you say you don't have other outputs per se, but in terms of inputs, you mentioned museums. I don't know, is there anything that you saw recently that was very inspiring in terms of movies or new musical artists? What inspires you these days?
This is where it gets tricky, because I was really trying hard to think about something. And when you think too hard, nothing comes to mind, which is quite stupid because of course I've seen stuff that inspire me. I think it's very, very different the way it comes. I mean, it can take a lot of different varied shapes, the way it comes at me. One of the things that I can remember maybe the most recently was I went to Vienna for weekends and went to this museum, and they had this exhibition about a designer from the late 19th century, beginning of the 20th century, who I've never heard of. He's called Dagobert Peach or Dagobert Perch. Don't know how to pronounce his name. And it was totally random that I kind of walked into his exhibition, never heard of his name, never seen anything he's done. And it felt so kind of wild and weird and wonderful. And that I really came out of it and I was like, whoa, I haven't been into museum for a long time and felt that kind of pleasantly surprised. But, I also go to the museum a lot and I get out and I'm like, whatever. As I was saying, sometimes more and more, I feel more inspired by space. I feel more touched by being able to walk around somewhere and getting, everything that feels right or feels surprising, and the light and the colors and all of that. That's where I'm more interested by at the moment. That's a bit vague. I'm sorry.
It's actually a great segue to our last question, which is, what do you think the role of beauty is in this world?
Wow. I think beauty is so important. I think that's what everyone's striving for, at the end of the day, whether it's a good thing or not. And I think we couldn't live without it, because everything that touches beauty or everything that touches art and culture is all about that, and not necessarily beauty as we know it, but a question around beauty, or a question about aesthetic, and question about how it makes you feel and what you feel like when you look at something. It's very subjective, obviously, but to me, it's kind of the purpose of so many things that is fueling our life, especially us who work in this, industry, but I think for so many more people as well. I think it's instrumental in creation or in the process of creation. I think it's may sound very futile, but I really don't think it is. I think it's so key to so many things, and people deserve, beauty, because life is hard.
Perfect conclusion. Thank you so much, Pierre-Yves.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much. It was
Pleasure.
such a pleasure and an inspiring conversation. So happy to have you in our life.
Thank you again for having me. It was really fun and a lot to think about.
That's it for today's episode. We thank our guests for their trust, and we thank you for being a part of our community. If you like this episode and want to support our work, consider ranking our podcast on Apple or Spotify. And if you know someone who could benefit from this conversation, please share our work with them to help them spread the dream of a conscious, creative community. Talk soon.